So we have the issue of climate engineering, and semantics are important. Too much media and other officials, not saying this board, they've been very courteous, but have not used the scientific terms, and this is not used for a reason, because the term chemtrails is not a scientific term, so we try to avoid those terms. But when you see CBS News, geoengineering to fight global warming is now mainstream topic conversation with all scientific organizations and with governmental officials, such as John Holdren, Obama's science advisor, who is actively advocating for the use of geoengineering. And again, these are aspects that media does not cover, because this would legitimize this issue. This would bring credibility to it. So we do have, again, science data it's too extensive to document here, but when we have current administration officials advocating for these programs and the immediate need to implement these programs, this subject should not be marginalized as it typically is by media. When we have, this is from MIT, this diagram is from MIT, where you clearly see an aircraft spraying particulates out the back. Now, again, this is mainstream scientific discussion. We have every major science institution talking about these issues right now, that these programs must be implemented. And so again, what we ask is that this issue be given attention. And our point here today, irregardless of where the contamination is coming from over Shasta County and the rest of the globe, we ask that the science be looked at and that the legitimacy of this issue be acknowledged with the science terms, that this is brought to public attention and brought into a public dialogue. This is, again, only the tip of the iceberg for what's available for documentation. This is a 40-page congressional research document, Geoengineering Governance and Technology. There's a number of documents like this. We have, even going back to the 60s, for example, we have 80-page presidential documents outlining the scope and scale of these programs, even back that far. We see skies like this. Certainly, we have a lot of people telling us this is normal commercial traffic, that this is normal, and that this is just random flights flying wherever they fly, and that this stuff sticks in the air. But if this is random, that's not so random. Do we think that commercial aircraft fly in grid patterns? Again, the data is absolutely there, but we have major agencies telling us that this isn't so. In fact, there's a NASA document that says chemtrails aren't real. But again, they use a term that's not scientific on purpose. And at the same time, we have patents from NASA for geoengineering. So there's been a tremendous effort to try to marginalize an issue that's tremendously impactful for all of us, equally impactful. And I certainly don't see the board as adversarial to us. I mean, I'm very grateful that we've been allowed to speak here and bring this issue up to light. And for our point, I think acknowledgement and disclosure is due for, in this case, for local agencies, the contamination issue. Because I've spoken in front of the California Air Resources Board, I've spoken in front of the California Energy Commission, and it seems that all these agencies are unwilling to look at this issue. And at this point, there are certain factors that can't be denied, and contamination is one of those factors. So we have NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, admitting on the record that the atmosphere is now full of particulates and they don't know where they're coming from. So this is quite astounding when you have the agency that's supposed to study this issue that's literally unable to identify the source. When I spoke in front of the California Energy Commission in Sacramento, they acknowledged the state was losing 20 to 40% of its rainfall from, quote, particulates of unknown origin. But that investigation was never followed through. There's an investigation going right now with state water quality. I spoke to that representative. Their fishing game has acknowledged that there's aluminum running down the waterways. I spoke to the representative with California State Water Quality, who made it clear that they were not going to test the rainfall for this contamination. But isn't that where runoff comes from? So again, we have an unwillingness to look at the obvious sources. This is a satellite image. It's a little foggy, but if you look closely in the bottom left quadrant, you can see aircraft trails blanket spraying the Pacific. This is visible on satellite imagery every single day. These silvery white skies we see are particulates blowing in from the coastal regions, and we have patents stating the dire need to enhance the marine layer, to try to deflect some of the sun's incoming thermal energy. It's called solar radiation management. So when we have satellite imagery of this happening, and planes flying in loops and grids, and we have this material blowing in on us, it's coming from somewhere, and CARB, this is important. We know this metal's falling on us. I furnished you guys today with about 40 lab tests from the state-certified lab showing a very, very substantial amount of metal. And again, aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form. That's important to remember because a lot of agencies try to say it's a common element, we should expect it. This is not the case. It doesn't exist in free form. So it's coming from somewhere, and CARB has told us it is not coming from China. So we know it's a more local origin. Now, we have a UV issue. This is another matter of disclosure for the board. We have a known, verifiable, indisputable contamination issue, and we know the board can't stop this. Nobody here expects that. We know that's far beyond the scope of the board, but we do have a contamination issue that's a danger to the citizens. So what I'm asking, is disclosure of this contamination, and we also have a very, very dangerous UV level. The bark is being burned off of trees in town. We're metering this UV with state-of-the-art meters. We're seeing UVB levels 1,200% higher than we're being told. And this is a government document, National Science Foundation, acknowledging that injecting sulfate particles, which is geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, will decimate the ozone layer, destroying from 1/4 to 3/4 of the ozone layer. So this is very significant, and this goes hand in hand with what we see. Again, article, unprecedented ozone hole opens up over the Canadian Arctic. We have very substantial northern hemisphere ozone depletion. Ozone depletion over even northern California is very substantial. We're seeing very dangerous UV levels. We're simply asking that that be disclosed. That's all. So again, this is a public health issue that we believe is necessary to disclose. This is a headline from a week ago. Blazing world record strongest UV rays ever measured on Earth. Many of you are familiar with the UV reading. A rating of 10 or 11 is considered extreme. NASA has just recorded, in fact, this is 11 years old. I don't know why it took 11 years for them to disclose this. Readings of 43. 43 is absolutely lethal to be outside. I mean, it's very dangerous to be exposed to that. So, again, we have very high readings here. We're asking for that to be disclosed. Health effects of UV radiation. The list is much longer than what it shows here, but we're seeing everything we would expect to go along with this exposure going off the charts. So, again, this comes down to a recognition of what's going on in our skies, and more importantly, where this board is concerned, an investigation and disclosure of the contamination and UV issue, which again is a public health hazard. These are trees in our local parking lots here. The bark is completely burned off these trees. Foliage is dropping. Branches are dying off on the trees. The trees in Redding don't look good, and this is not just a drought-related issue. And I've been in the field with USDA soil scientists measuring also soil pH changes, and this is another arena where we know this contamination is happening. We're seeing pH changes of 10 to 12 times toward alkaline from established USDA soil baseline studies. So, again, one more source of confirmation that this contamination is indeed there. Trees in Redding, again, when I moved here 12 years ago, the trees looked outstanding in this city. Now they look quite horrific and getting worse by the day. And this is exactly what would be the known and expected effect with extensive UV damage. Geoengineering causing drought. All of us know we're being droughted out. For 10 years I've said, because the science says so, that the more they aerosolize, the less it will rain here, period. So again, we have yet one more confirmation of when they spray upstream in our storm track, it diminishes and disperses our rain.
Mr. Wigington, I'm going to ask a question. How much time did we have scheduled for? Okay, has that already passed?
So that was a 10-minute beeper.
So let's do this. How much more time do you think?
30 seconds.
Okay, very good. We want you to be able to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. NOAA already deciding that we're not going to get rain from El Nino, which is astounding that they would know that so quickly. Another satellite photo, and this is hard to see on this screen, but the entire, people can view this at geoengineeringwatch.org, the entire Pacific is covered with grid patterns in this shot. It's hard to see. Prevalence of Alzheimer's disease going off the charts. Autism, 10,000% increase. Known connection with aluminum, same with Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's and autism, the common link, aluminum exposure. Last slide, the right to know. That's all we're asking. The public has a right to know there's a public health hazard in regards to the heavy metal contamination and the UV radiation. That's all we're asking is for that disclosure. Thank you for the extra time. Thank you for addressing it. That's great. Out of respect to the supervisors, they're showing great courtesy that no other board has had the courage to do yet. So let's give them all the respect they deserve.
Well, Mr. Wigington, before we move on to the scheduled additional presenters at 3 minutes apiece, and I'm going to just ask in advance as you come up that we're going to hold you to that 3 minutes.
They know that.
I do want to ask this board before, because you're our main presenter today, if there are any additional questions at this time from this board. Okay. So I have just 2 questions, and I'd like to ask you, and please excuse this. This is not meant in any other way, but out of complete respect. Could you just really concisely, what do you believe the purpose of this engineered spraying is? I mean this in all sincerity. What do you say the purpose of it is?
I can tell you what the stated purpose is by governmental document and U.S. patents.
Yeah, right into that mic there.
I can tell you what the stated purpose is. Solar radiation management, SRM, to block the sun. That's the stated purpose. The consequences don't seem to be considered with these programs, but that is the stated purpose on almost all UN and global governance documents for these programs.
Okay, and obviously you presented a great deal of material to myself and to other board members over the years, and that is the conclusion drawn. I just wanted to draw that out today because I didn't hear that specific language, so I wanted to make sure we state that. But then on a personal level, I have another question, and I've asked many people, and no one's been able to answer this question for me, so I mean this in all sincerity. Why does the spraying create a drought in California and flooding in the Midwest?
Thank you for asking that question.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
When you aerosolize the storm track, and the science backs up what I'm saying word for word, you diminish and disperse the rain. This is not seeding to create rain. This is seeding to create artificial cloud cover. And because there's too many condensation nuclei, it tends to disperse that moisture exactly as we've seen over California again and again. Back to my talk in front of the California Energy Commission, they recognized this fact. I spoke to their top scientist. When you have too many particles in the air, it diminishes rain. It does not augment it if those particles are too small. So it tends to migrate moisture from one place to another, creating drought and deluge. And this is very well documented from every major science institution, from MIT, Scientific American. These effects are known. So it's not a uniform effect. It tends to disrupt the hydrological cycle completely. So when you spray upstream in the storm track, it tends to migrate that moisture somewhere else where it comes down in a deluge. And that's exactly what we see.
Mr. Wigington, thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Les.
appreciate that. Don't go away.
You're welcome. Mr. Wigington, I've had one statement here, and I want to see if you confirm that or not. In your belief of following through with this and trying to get situations resolved, is it because it is a public health hazard? Is that one of your #1 concerns, that this must be disclosed?
That is our request of the board, because that is why these programs can go on and on and on, because media will not cover it until the actual effects are made known. And this contamination issue, again, is absolutely verifiable. Same with the UV issue. We can meter it for you. We have state-of-the-art meters. So, and we have corroboration from other science studies. So yes, that is the request of the board. We fully recognize the board has no power to deal with this issue, nor does CARB, nor other state agencies. But the contamination issue is a public health hazard, and we believe that disclosure is necessary, required, and that's all we're asking is disclosure of the heavy metal contamination and the UV issue. That's what we're asking for. Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions from the board of Mr. Wigington at this time? Mr. Wigington, thank you very much for the presentation.